The disconnect between high achievers and regular individuals is a complex social phenomenon that deserves deep analysis. This difficulty in connecting is not simply a matter of arrogance or lack of empathy, but rather the result of multiple psychological, social, and structural factors that intertwine in subtle and profound ways. When someone reaches elevated levels of success in their field, whether in business, sports, academia, or the arts, that person inevitably begins to inhabit a reality fundamentally different from the majority. This isn't just about having more money or status, but rather a complete reconfiguration of what constitutes normal in daily life. Before we dive deep into this topic, if you've ever felt this disconnect yourself or know someone who struggles with this, drop a comment below sharing your experience. And if you want to understand the psychology behind success and human connection, hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future content. Now let's get into it. For a high-level executive, stress might mean negotiating million-dollar contracts, managing hundreds of employees, or making decisions that affect thousands of lives. For an average person, stress might be paying rent on time, dealing with a difficult boss, or balancing work and family. Both experiences are valid and genuinely stressful for those living them, but the distance between these contexts makes mutual understanding difficult. This divergence of realities creates a problem of emotional translation. When the high performer tries to share their challenges, it can sound like complaining from someone with unimaginable privileges. When the average person shares their struggles, the high performer may inadvertently minimize them because, from their perspective, they seem like easily solvable problems. The cognitive dissonance becomes particularly acute when high achievers attempt to offer advice based on their own experiences. What worked in their context, taking calculated risks, making bold career moves, investing significant resources, may be completely unrealistic for someone living paycheck to paycheck or without a safety net. The high achiever's normal decisions would be catastrophic gambles for someone in a different economic reality. High achievers frequently develop their identity around their accomplishments. Personal worth becomes deeply intertwined with success metrics like promotions, recognition, victories, growing numbers. This fusion between being and doing creates a lens through which all social interactions are filtered. In casual conversations, this manifests in subtle but significant ways. The high performer may unconsciously redirect conversations to topics where they can demonstrate superior competence or knowledge. They may struggle to simply be present without seeking to optimize, improve, or solve something. The capacity to relax and enjoy interactions without a defined purpose atrophies over time. Additionally, there's constant pressure to maintain the image of success. Admitting doubts, weaknesses, or failures can feel like a threat to the carefully constructed identity. This creates a barrier of authenticity where people feel they're interacting with a polished persona, not a vulnerable human being. The psychological weight of this performance is exhausting. Many high achievers report feeling like imposters, constantly worried that someone will discover they're not as competent as they appear. Yet this vulnerability rarely gets shared because the competitive environments that created their success actively punish displays of weakness. The result is a lonely existence where genuine connection becomes nearly impossible. As people climb the social or professional hierarchy, their social circle naturally transforms. They begin frequenting the same places as others of similar status, participating in the same events, sending children to the same schools. This phenomenon, known as social homophily, is natural and to some extent inevitable. However, the consequence is a progressive distancing from diversity of perspectives. When everyone around you shares similar experiences of success, certain assumptions about the world begin to seem universal when they are, in fact, specific to class or status. The person may genuinely believe that anyone can succeed if they work hard enough, because everyone in their bubble confirms this narrative. This isolation also affects language and cultural references. Jokes, stories, and examples that make sense within the bubble can be completely alienating to those outside it. The high achiever might casually mention experiences like frequent international travel, dinners at expensive restaurants, or networking at exclusive events, without realizing how this creates distance. The bubble becomes self-reinforcing. As the high achiever becomes more disconnected from regular people, they become less comfortable in those interactions, which leads to further withdrawal into familiar circles. What starts as circumstantial segregation becomes intentional avoidance. The effort required to bridge the gap begins to feel too great, especially when comfortable alternatives exist. High-performance environments shape specific communication patterns that are valued and rewarded in these contexts, but which can be detrimental in normal social interactions. In corporate or competitive environments, the ability to quickly identify and implement solutions is crucial. This trains the brain to automatically enter solution mode when presented with any problem. However, in most casual conversations, people aren't seeking solutions. They're seeking validation, empathy, or simply venting. When a high performer immediately offers unsolicited advice, the implicit message is, "Your problem is simple, and you should have solved it yourself," which devalues the other person's emotional experience. High-performance environments value concise and direct communication. Beating around the bush is seen as a waste of time. But in social contexts, especially in more relational cultures, this frankness can seem abrupt, insensitive, or even rude. The person may be seen as arrogant or domineering when they're simply communicating the way they've learned to do. High performers are trained to base arguments on evidence, data, and logic. In casual discussions about feelings, personal experiences, or subjective preferences, this approach can seem cold and invalidating. Not everything needs to be debated or proven. These communication patterns also extend to body language and social cues. High achievers often develop a commanding presence, firm handshakes, direct eye contact, confident posture that can be intimidating in casual settings. They may dominate conversations without realizing it, or fail to pick up on subtle signals that others want to contribute. One of the biggest obstacles to connection is the difficulty high achievers have in recognizing the external factors that contributed to their success. There's a psychological tendency known as fundamental attribution bias, where we attribute our successes to internal qualities like intelligence, hard work, and determination, while minimizing external factors like opportunities, timing, network of contacts, and initial resources. This self-made narrative is comforting because it provides a sense of control and validates the genuine effort the person invested. However, it ignores structural realities like who had access to good education from an early age, who didn't need to work during their studies, who had mentors or family connections, who never faced systematic discrimination, who had the financial security to take risks. When a high performer gives advice based exclusively on their personal experience without recognizing these contextual factors, the message can sound arrogant and disconnected from the reality of those who didn't have the same advantages. "I made it, so you can too" ignores that the playing field isn't level. The resistance to acknowledging privilege is often fierce because it threatens the narrative of meritocracy that justifies the high achiever's position and wealth. If success is partly due to circumstances beyond control, then perhaps those who haven't succeeded aren't simply less talented or hardworking. This cognitive dissonance is deeply uncomfortable. Interactions between people of different levels of achievement are often marked by subtle anxieties on both sides, creating an uncomfortable social dance. On the high performer's side, there's awareness that demonstrating success can seem like showing off. This leads to strategies like performative humility, where the person minimizes their accomplishments in ways that still highlight them, or completely avoids talking about certain aspects of their life, creating zones of artificial silence in the conversation. There's also the fear of being used, or that people approach them only out of interest. On the average person's side, there may be feelings of inadequacy, envy, or defensiveness. Automatic comparisons happen, leading the person to feel that their own accomplishments are insignificant. This can manifest as withdrawal, sarcasm, veiled criticism, or preemptive rejection of the high performer before rejection comes in the opposite direction. These unconscious dynamics poison the possibility of genuine connection because neither party is being completely authentic. There's an underlying tension that prevents the relaxation and vulnerability necessary for meaningful relationships. Both people are performing versions of themselves rather than being themselves. Paradoxically, as people develop sophisticated skills in their areas of expertise, they may lose more basic social competencies. In elite environments, certain rules of interaction are different. Networking replaces friendship as relationships become transactional, evaluated by added value. The implicit question in new encounters is, how can this person help me, instead of, would I like to get to know this person better? This mentality is difficult to turn off in non-professional contexts. In competitive environments, showing doubts or insecurities can be used against you. The person learns to always project confidence, competence, and control. But deep connections require the opposite: openness about imperfections and uncertainties. When every hour is potentially valuable in terms of productivity or opportunities, investing time in purposeless conversations or unproductive hobbies can seem like a luxury one can't afford. Relationships that develop slowly through repeated casual encounters become rare. The skills required for genuine connection, active listening, emotional attunement, patience with inefficiency, tolerance for ambiguity, are often the opposite of what's rewarded in high-performance environments. The longer someone spends in these environments, the more these essential human capacities can deteriorate. One of the most insidious aspects of high-achievement culture is how it transforms every interaction into a potential competition. High achievers have been conditioned through years of education, sports, and career advancement to constantly evaluate where they stand relative to others. This ranking mentality becomes so deeply embedded that it operates automatically, even in contexts where competition is entirely inappropriate. In a casual dinner conversation, the high achiever's mind might unconsciously track who went to better schools, who has more impressive job titles, who travels to more exotic locations, who has more followers on social media, whose children attend more prestigious institutions. This constant comparative assessment creates an exhausting undercurrent in social interactions. Even when trying to be present and engaged, part of the brain is running these calculations. This competitive framework also distorts how high achievers process information from others. When someone shares an accomplishment, the high achiever might feel compelled to share a bigger one. When someone mentions a challenge, they might mention a harder one they've overcome. This isn't necessarily conscious one-upmanship. It's an automatic pattern developed over years of needing to establish credibility and dominance in competitive environments. The tragedy is that genuine connection requires the exact opposite mindset: a willingness to celebrate others without comparison, to be impressed without feeling diminished, to acknowledge others' struggles without making it about yourself. Unlearning competitive reflexes is one of the most difficult aspects of rebuilding connection capacity. High achievers often have access to more options in virtually every domain of life: where to live, where to travel, what to eat, whom to associate with, how to spend free time. While this abundance of choice is a privilege, it also creates a particular kind of paralysis and dissatisfaction that further distances them from regular people. Research in decision psychology shows that having too many options can lead to decreased satisfaction with whatever choice is ultimately made, because people remain acutely aware of all the alternatives they rejected. For high achievers who can afford almost anything, the question becomes not "can I do this?" but "is this the optimal use of my resources?" This optimization mindset makes it difficult to simply enjoy experiences. When interacting with people who have fewer choices, high achievers may struggle to understand why someone would be satisfied with what seems like a suboptimal situation. They might wonder why someone doesn't just move to a better city, switch to a better job, or leave an unsatisfying relationship. The constraints that make these things impossible, financial, familial, emotional, may be intellectually understood but not viscerally grasped by someone who has always had options. Conversely, people with fewer choices may find the high achievers' constant optimization and dissatisfaction bewildering or irritating. From their perspective, someone who has so much yet still isn't satisfied seems ungrateful or perpetually restless. The inability to appreciate abundance because you're always focused on the next milestone creates a fundamental disconnect in how different groups experience life satisfaction. Modern high achievement culture is deeply invested in the myth of meritocracy, the belief that success is primarily determined by individual merit, talent plus effort rather than circumstances. This belief serves important psychological functions for high achievers. It justifies their advantages, provides a sense of control over outcomes, and offers a clear roadmap for continued success. However, this mythology creates several problems for authentic connection. First, it requires high achievers to downplay or ignore the role of luck, timing, family background, access to resources, and systemic advantages in their success stories. This selective blindness makes them unable to fully empathize with people whose circumstances prevent them from achieving similar outcomes despite equivalent effort. Second, the meritocratic framework implicitly suggests that those who haven't achieved similar success must lack either talent or work ethic. While high achievers rarely state this explicitly, the assumption lurks beneath many interactions. When someone mentions financial struggles, there's an unspoken question: but have you really tried everything? This subtle judgment, even when unintended, is palpable and creates distance. Third, meritocracy narrative encourages high achievers to believe their advantages are earned and therefore deserved, while others' difficulties are the natural consequences of their choices. This moral framework makes it difficult to feel genuine solidarity with people in challenging circumstances, because at some level, their situation is seen as self-created. Breaking through this mythology requires confronting uncomfortable truths about inequality, privilege, and the arbitrary nature of many life outcomes. It means accepting that you might not be fundamentally more talented or hardworking than someone who ended up in very different circumstances. You may have just been luckier in ways that compounded over time. High achievers typically operate at a different temporal rhythm than most people. They're conditioned to work quickly, make decisions rapidly, and see delays as failures. Their time is often monetized, either explicitly through high hourly rates or implicitly through opportunity costs, which makes every minute feel consequential. This accelerated tempo creates friction in regular social interactions, which naturally occur at a slower pace. Friendships develop gradually through accumulated small interactions. Deep conversations can't be rushed. Enjoying a meal together isn't about efficiency. For someone whose brain is wired to optimize time usage, these inefficient social experiences can feel uncomfortable or wasteful. The high achiever might check their phone during conversations, think about other obligations while supposedly relaxing with friends, or mentally schedule when they need to leave an event before they've even arrived. This divided attention is perceptible to others, who feel like they're competing for the high achiever's focus against more important priorities. Conversely, from the high achiever's perspective, others might seem frustratingly slow, taking too long to get to the point, overthinking simple decisions, or lacking urgency about opportunities. This mutual frustration about pace creates a fundamental incompatibility in how different groups want to spend time together. Learning to downshift, to be genuinely present without watching the clock, to embrace inefficiency in social contexts. These are skills that high achievers must consciously cultivate. It requires recognizing that not all value can be measured in productivity metrics, and that the waste of unhurried time with others is actually where much of life's meaning resides. Sustained high achievement often requires emotional regulation that, while adaptive in competitive contexts, can become maladaptive in personal relationships. High achievers learn to suppress or minimize emotions that might interfere with performance, like anxiety, sadness, frustration, uncertainty. Over time, this emotional suppression can lead to what psychologists call alexithymia, difficulty identifying and describing one's own emotional states. When you've spent years pushing through fatigue, ignoring discomfort, and maintaining composure under pressure, the ability to access and express vulnerable emotions can atrophy. High achievers might describe everything as fine or busy because they've lost touch with more nuanced emotional experiences. They may struggle to sit with uncomfortable feelings rather than immediately trying to fix or eliminate them. This emotional blunting creates problems in relationships where emotional attunement and empathy are essential. If you can't access your own emotional depth, it's difficult to resonate with others' emotional experiences. Partners, friends, and family members may feel that the high achiever is emotionally unavailable or dismissive of feelings. Additionally, the emotions that high achievers do allow themselves to experience often cluster in a narrow range, like excitement about achievements, frustration with obstacles, determination to overcome challenges. The quieter, more complex emotions like tenderness, contentment, melancholy, or gratitude may be underexperienced or unfamiliar. This narrowed affective range makes it difficult to connect with people whose emotional lives have more varied textures. Reconnecting emotionally requires creating space for feelings without immediately acting on them or trying to change them. It means developing comfort with ambiguity, sitting with sadness without needing to fix it, and allowing vulnerability without seeing it as weakness. Many high achievers eventually face a crisis of meaning when they realize that external accomplishments don't provide the deep satisfaction they expected. After achieving the prestigious degree, landing the corner office, making the $1 million, or winning the award, there's often a hollow feeling. Is this all there is? This existential questioning can be profoundly isolating because it's difficult to discuss without sounding ungrateful or out of touch. How do you tell someone struggling to make ends meet that your six-figure salary hasn't made you happy? How do you explain that achieving everything on your checklist has somehow left you feeling empty rather than fulfilled? The people most likely to understand this experience are other high achievers who've faced the same realization. But these are often the same people trapped in the bubble. Regular people may have a clearer understanding that meaning comes from relationships, community, and purpose rather than achievement, but the high achiever has to unlearn years of conditioning to access this wisdom. This crisis, while painful, can actually become a bridge to reconnection. When high achievers become willing to examine what truly matters beyond status and success, they often rediscover values they abandoned in their climb, like creativity for its own sake, service to others, time with loved ones, engagement with beauty, contribution to community. These universal human needs can become points of connection across different life circumstances. The journey involves asking different questions, not how can I achieve more, but how can I matter more? Not how do I optimize this, but how do I savor this? Not who can help me advance, but whom can I help? This reorientation from achievement to meaning, from success to significance, opens pathways to more authentic human connection and represents the ultimate reconciliation between high performance and genuine humanity.